Behind the Scene with David Bedein, May 15th, 2023. I want to talk this evening about the Nakba. Now, Nakba is a concept that many people thought started in 1948. And when I found out about it in 1998, when I was a columnist for the Philadelphia Inquirer. That's a settlement on the Delaware River, Philadelphia, from. Anyway, so I was writing it up because I got an invitation to the PLO headquarters for the media. They were discussing the Nakba, the whole what happened to the Arabs in '48, and they informed everyone from here on in, the Nakba is going to be observed in the Palestinian Arab sector and going to be very high profile. Now, now that's 25 years ago. Now, most people in the world of journalism and who don't know better think that the Nakba, the idea of Nakba, which means disaster, was something that was started in 1948 in terms of a movement. Well, that's not the case. There was a strategic decision made by the Palestine Liberation Organization that became the PA, the Palestinian Authority, in 1998. They felt they were losing the whole connection. So it's very important to understand the question, which actually was the right time to ask the question. When did this whole business start with the PLO and negotiations with Israel? Well, it technically began on September 1st, 1982. Okay, that's not something that people know because people have forgotten. The U.S. president who pushed the PLO was Ronald Reagan. Ronald Reagan. Ronald Reagan was the president, and whereas most people think that it was Jimmy Carter who pushed the PLO, he didn't succeed in pushing the PLO on the agenda. As a matter of fact, I know a liberal rabbi, blessed memory, named Rabbi Aaron Jacob Wolf from Chicago, and who resented the fact that the U.S. government was interfering with Jewish life and trying to start a whole process with the PLO, and it was stopped. I had conversations at the time with Rabbi Wolf and with people in the Carter administration. They didn't succeed. Whereas Reagan began his program, the Reagan Peace Plan, which involved ceding Judea, Samaria, Gaza, and even part of Jerusalem to the PLO, and they didn't call it the PLO, they said the Palestinian entity. And in 1988, Arafat was brought in as an official recognized entity by the United States government. Actually, that led to some rather funny things because the PLO was defined by the United States as a terrorist organization, and the United States began negotiations with them. So again, my office has been around since 1987, so I got involved with this subject pretty well, and it's fascinating to see what happened. The PLO couldn't come in the U.S. but even though they were recognized. So what they did, the great Uber Chachomim, the PLO decided to rename their agency the Palestine Human Rights Information Center. And again, yeah, if you don't have a sense of humor in this business, you can't survive. Now, Israeli intelligence couldn't find it, didn't know where it was, but it said on their stationery they were in Chicago. So in January 1989, I was visiting in Chicago. I was giving a talk there, and I went to visit their office. My father, may he rest in peace, he gave me an extra $100 if I needed it on a trip, and it was very nice because I use it for taxi to and fro from the Palestine Human Rights Information Center office, and I discovered that this was where the PLO was based. And I sent at that time we were using faxes. I sent a fax to my friends in Israel and people in the Knesset, that I've at the and also in the government. I'm at the PLO headquarters, which is called the Palestine Human Rights Information Center. And it sounds very strange that an organization, which is a terrorist organization, would register itself as a human rights organization. But that's one of the absurdities that we faced. When I came back here to Jerusalem, I met with I got a response from the Israeli government that Mr. Shamir's office wanted to see me. I said, okay. And they closed the door and said, how did you get there? I said, I took a taxi. But how did you get there? I took a taxi because the Israeli government couldn't find it. They didn't know, that if you have an address, you give the address to the driver, you can get there. And that's how I began a whole process of discovering how human rights organizations, which had been infiltrated by the PLO, were making headway because that's how they were registered. And it took many years until a group called NGO Monitor, which some of you may have heard of, started, and that was a good 10 years later, and damage had been done because the takeover, the PLO takeover of human rights groups was all part of that, was part of their strategy at the time. But this leads to the discussion that I want to discuss right now about the Nakba. Now, for the past um, you know, quarter century, the Palestinian Authority has been insistent that their people were innocent victims of a historically unprecedented crime in 1948, which they compare to the Holocaust. Now, their account is an example of the phenomenon called the Big Lie, used to launch violent demonstrations against the Jews. Now, the Nakba narrative depicts the founding of the State of Israel as a catastrophe that resulted in the dispossession of the land, state, and people. In other words, they're teaching the idea that the purpose of the State of Israel was to kick out the Arabs. I mean, anyone who knows the word balagan, the things that are rather disorganized, knows that that's not how it worked. Although there were Arabs who were kicked out. I did interview the very high level Israeli colonel who was involved in exiting the Arabs out of Ashdod and Beersheba. That's a story in itself, but it wasn't done with violence. It was done between 1951 and 53. Now, now you're supposed to say, what, 51, 53? Well, wait a second. We thought that the exit of the Arabs was in 48. Well, because of the Korean War, the United States was kind of busy, and it was also a time that Israel, if you know the history, tripled its population, and they needed places for the Olim. So the concept of having Beersheba and Ashdod and many other places open for a settlement, and asking the Arabs to leave, doing what they could, so the Arabs had a choice of going um, to Gaza, Al-Fahim, or Ramla, and many of them chose to be in UNRWA, the United Nations Relief and Works Agency, and the United Nations Relief and Works Agency has been around since 1949, handling Palestinian Arab refugees, temporary agency. In other words, they are there with no expectations, with no expectations that it would be anything but temporary. It's now 75 years later, and at that time, there was close to 1 million Arabs who were in the refugee camps. How many are there now? Well, it's actually right now 6.7 million Arabs in the refugee camps. And now I met with the head of the Palestine Right of Return Committee. They like giving interviews, and he claims that there's like 12 million. So we have a lot of Arabs floating around who claim residency. But in terms of the UNRWA population, the people in the UNRWA population, they claim again 6.7 million in UNRWA. Now there's 59 refugee camps. It's public knowledge. Let me just pass me my book, please. I have a book here which people can order through Amazon called Roadblock to Peace. This came out 8 years ago, and you'll see this monument here. That's in front of the Ida camp. Ida means return. This is right near their Kever Rachel, Rachel's grave in Bethlehem, and the Arabs who live here. This is the symbol. The key symbol is the right of return, and this is this keyhole, right? And the children on the way to school, they go through there every day. And amongst the other things, our agency, the Israel Resource News Agency, working with, now it's named for my brother, the Nachum Bedein Center for Near East Policy Research, we made 20 movies in the refugee camps and show exactly what's going on. And a lot of people haven't seen it because it's just not mainstream. But this is one of the things going on, that the refugees are in these camps under premise and promise of the right of return. So I began this saying about the Nakba narrative, how the PLO registered as a human rights organization, and they've been pushing the idea that the right of return is a human rights issue. Now, in 1998, as is on May 15th, 1998, that's 25 years ago today, Arafat declared the Nakba as a movement, as a day to be observed, celebrated, cried at the Memorial Day. But anyway, Nakba really became part of the PLO narrative in 1998, not 1948. So from then until now, it's been used. It's not known. I mean, all the journalists I work with, if I say something like that to them, then no one, they think I need a psychiatrist. Maybe I do. They think something happened to my brain. They think that how can this possibly be? I mean, it's one thing to be politically incorrect, but another thing to be politically crazy, because it's accepted by mainstream media that the Nakba movement, Nakba issue, has been going on since 19 since since uh, ad infinitum, since 1948. Now, there is someone, a PLO scholar, who wrote a book about the Nakba back in the day, a guy named Zurich, who wrote a book about the expulsion of the Arabs in '48 and how this became their national trauma and all that kind of stuff. But it was simply not something was emphasized. Now, in 1998, which is 5 years into the peace process, the Oslo process, Arafat was very happy to be acclaimed as if you recall, he got the Nobel Peace Prize in 1994. Now, I was there. I like to, I mean, I used to watch The Twilight Zone, so I watched this. It was very interesting to see a PLO terrorist getting the Nobel Peace Prize. And people say I asked the only real question, which is, do you deserve it? And I made it out of Oslo, okay. I said, Mr. Arafat, and I just asked Rabin in Paris the same question. Are you deserving of the Nobel Peace Prize? Are you going to fight Hamas? Are you going to cancel the PLO covenant? And the answer he gave me was amazing. He says, I don't have to fight Hamas. They're my brothers. Now, one of the reasons that statement didn't get out was because that ceremony was on Shabbat, and because I'm a religious fanatic and I do not record things on Shabbat, I couldn't record it. So I thought, well, there's hundreds of reporters here. Not one of them reported it. And as a matter of fact, when he got, I get all kinds of new. Let me just divert for a second with a riddle. What's the difference between a crackpot and a genius? Well, a genius is a step ahead of his time. A crackpot is 2 steps ahead of his time. So you have to decide which I am. Okay. Now, there's a lot of news items that I have that nobody else has. For example, I was up there in the gallery while Arafat was getting his Nobel Peace Prize with Rabin and Peres, and I'm following what's going on. I'm sitting next to a journalist who knows Arabic. He slips in there a statement that this is going to be involved in the armed struggle. The armed struggle is going to be by force of arms. Now, I asked the Norwegian government and the Nobel Peace Prize Committee, since my staff speaks Arabic, can we have a copy of the of the video? I'm an Arafat, Arafat, fan. I really want to see it. Well, they got very nervous, and I can tell you from the journalists there who know Arabic, who know what he said, he just slipped in. It's the first time someone got the Nobel Peace Prize. I mean, of course, Nobel was named for the guy who invented what was it, the dynamite, So there it was. Anyway, so the key element of Arafat's annual Nakba speech since 1998 is that his claim that there were all these millions of Arabs who wanted to go back to their homes and from Jaffa, Haifa, and lots of other places that don't exist. Now, the person who carried on that campaign with much less feistiness is Mahmoud Abbas, also known as Abu Mazen. Now, one of the reasons he doesn't get the great press that Arafat is he's very polite, very nice. I mean, he's a killer who's nice, but one of the things when journalists walk into him and diplomats, he will say his first line is always, "You have too much Arab incitement. I don't know why you should trust us." That's what he says, and that's how he disarms people right away. But again, what he has done as a good administrator, if you want to call it a good administrator, has been to reorganize the schools. So the schools have curriculum so that every child knows where he comes from. Now they survey the families. Where do you come from? Ashkelon, Ashdod. I mean, there's 531 places. And then they give lessons how you have to take back your place in 48, and how we're going to get there. Well, you can sit around, but you also engage in the armed struggle. Now, we've made several movies of Arabs trying to rush the fences in Gaza, but also in Judea, Samaria, and they have very little interest. And this is what disappoints some people in what's called the peace movement. They have no interest in Judea, Samaria. As a matter of fact, the one interview I had with Yasser Arafat, I asked Arafat, I said, what's going to be? I happen to live in the city of Efrat, suburban Bethlehem, and what's going to be? What's my will I be allowed in your state? He says, you can stay where you are. We didn't take any Arab land. In other words, I felt really good that I had insurance from Arafat. I came back, I told Rabbi Riskin, all kinds of other things. We're okay now. But there was a caveat. He said, if you were from Ramla or Lud, you'd have to leave. Now, the PLO has a concept of settlements and illegal settlements. And the illegal settlements are the ones they lost in 48. Now, the Nakba narrative, which is today, by the way, also in Capitol Hill, thanks to Bernie Sanders. Bernie Sanders is he's going to be through Rashida Tlaib, Muslim congresswoman. He is hosting the Nakba ceremony today in Washington. Very important, and that's what a lot of people don't know, that he's actually doing that. So the Nakba is that you should prepare yourself for going back and prepare to kill everybody in their way. Now, this is another reason to think I'm a little bit crazy, because I was giving this material, and all of a sudden, 2 years ago, in May 2021, actually 2 years exactly, there were some riots in various places inside Israel's Green Line in Ramla, Lud, Yaffo, Akko, and people walked around with little pieces of paper where they want to go back to. And that was the basis of the rioting. And that could be renewed at any moment. Now, one of the projects that we have created in my office, we create projects to find out the truth. There's an organization named Zochrot. Zochrot, Zocrot, which coordinates a project to encourage Arabs to go back to your homes in 48 and help you do it. We'll locate their homes and tell the people to leave. And these are Jews who are running it. And it's rather unbelievable. And what I'm looking for right now, and I'm saying this on an open microphone, I'm looking for people to help us finance that, and they finance privately. But this is something which we need to get out, because it's not, again, what's commonly thought of in Israel and everywhere else is that what the Arabs want is what they lost in is not what they lost in 48, but what Arabs want is the settlements in Judea, Samaria, Gaza, which is already gone, but also in Jerusalem. They think that this is what the people want. Well, they don't know. It's not well known the extent to which this has become a whole story. Now, when the Orient House existed, that was the PLO headquarters in Jerusalem. Again, I was a regular there, and not many people like me were there, but I always told them, "Why do you come here?" I said, "I like the coffee," and they were open-minded, so I was open-minded. I liked Turkish coffee, Arab coffee, and I was able to get the word out about what's going on, so that nobody would listen to me. But anyway, that's the reality. That the idea of planning out the idea of right of return systematically, and the Arabs are listening. Jews aren't listening, but that's part of what maybe the Jewish experience. When I compare, as I mentioned a few minutes ago, I had one interview with Arafat, which was fascinating. I brought with me a gentleman who was an expert on body language, so we could read him, size him up. And his response was, if I didn't know who he was, I would say he was a man of peace, incapable of violence, except for when two Arabs disrupted him in the middle of a conversation, one was smoking and stuff, bothering him. They gave him a look like he could kill him. Now, I'm reminded when I was new in Israel, and I took a course from a man named George Mossy, who was my favorite professor at the University of Wisconsin, then became an Aliyah. And he gave a source that Hitler, in order to advance he was already known as a thug when he was running for chancellor. He hired a PR firm, so that the PR firm, when he was doing this whistle stopping in 1932, he went from place to place by plane, very unusual then, and he was told to kiss babies, and pet dogs, or maybe it was just dogs and pet babies. I don't know. But anyway, there's a rumor, and I'm trying to verify it, is that he hired Disney Studios. I don't know if that's the case, but I do know that the charm of the PLO is an amazing charm. I mean, there are Jewish groups coming from all over the world who take tours with the PLO, and they just have no idea the extent to which they're involved with murdering Jews. They have no idea. If I say the word Ma'alot, there's also the 25th anniversary of the massacre in Ma'alot, a school in the Galil. I used to be a social worker up in Tzfat. I knew many of the youngsters who survived the Ma'alot massacre. And in the PLO history book, what happened in Ma'alot? 22 Israeli soldiers were killed, not children. Oh, now there's a whole generation that doesn't know that. Now there's a whole, in terms of what's being taught to the kids, you can see our website, IsraelBehindTheNews.com. We have the curriculum there. Again, Dr. Michael Oren told me on the record, he was in the government, that there was an order or an advisory in Israeli intelligence not to look at the school books. If you want to maintain the school, you want to maintain the peace process, keep people a little bit in the dark. Now, I want to show a school book, which is amazing. And again, I'm looking to make presentations to people who will listen, who have influence. And this is a school book for fourth grade. It is a civics school book. And in the middle of it, you have a picture of Dalal al-Mughrabi. Now, who is Dalal al-Mughrabi? Right? She murdered 36 Jews on a bus, March 11th, 1978.
Coastal Road
The Coastal Road massacre. Correct. Now, her claim to fame is that she was, by the way, she not only killed them on the bus, she also killed when she landed in a little boat. She immediately murdered. She was the head of the terror gang, and she murdered Gail Rubin, who was Senator Abraham Ribikov's niece. She was taking pictures of Gan Michael. So that's that legacy is preserved in this book, Palestinian Authority School Book. Well, who's financing the Palestinian Ministry of Education? Well, I thought you'd never ask. Because the Palestinian Ministry of Education is financed by 135 nations around the world and by UNRWA, the United Nations Relief and Works Agency. 58% of their budget goes to UNRWA, or goes to education. Now, this is not known because there's more or less it's not censored. What I'm talking about is not censored. It's just not politically correct to mention these things. And I'm looking for people to help me, our agency, confront diplomats who are not bad people. I don't think the diplomats are bad people necessarily, but I'm looking for people to help us out to approach the donor countries with the truth, what the education curriculum is about. This is very difficult to do because, excuse me, Nakba, the Nakba idea is that these people were persecuted and they're in a bad way, and they need a good education system. Now, the concept of education for peace was one of the foci of the Oslo process at the very beginning. And as a matter of fact, the hope was that when the PLO had their own education system, which started on August 1st, 1998, and August 1st, 2000, that it would be schools for peace. And Shimon Peres, the Minister of Foreign Affairs, I was witness to him saying on January 1st, 2000, that there would be a curriculum for peace. Well, I didn't know if he was lying or not lying, but I asked him who created this curriculum. He gave me the name of the Palestinian Arab professor at Berzeg University. I went there to see him. He said, well, good news and bad news. We've created the curriculum. We're not allowed to use it. Oh, I went back to Paris at the same conference. Mr. Peres, I understand that the curriculum that you were mentioning before is not allowed to be used. He walked away from the microphone and said, I know. Okay, so that's one of the reasons people do not know. Incidentally, the Binyanei Ha'uma, the Israel Convention Center, is about to be renamed for Paris, and people who think that's a bad idea should make their voices heard. Incidentally, one of the scoops that our agency revealed back in 1994 is that Peres took $1.2 million out of the Paris Center and paid Terry Larson, who was a member of the Nobel Peace Prize Committee. He paid him that money in order to get the Nobel Peace Prize also for himself. And Christensen, who was a member of the committee, very, very honorable, he admitted to that. And in 2002, we made this into a big scandal. After Chris Christensen, Kerry Christensen, excuse me, made this, confirmed that Paris had paid for the Nobel Peace Prize to Terry Larson. So that's the legacy of what we have to deal with in terms of the inherent corruption of what's going on. Now, the strategy of promoting the Nakba as a peace, I want to suggest that there be a UNRWA peace initiative. UNRWA, yeah, UNRWA peace initiative. What would that be? And anyone can get involved in it, and all it takes is a few people to make an issue. My mentor in the world of social work, his name was Eliezer Jaffe. We used to say that a problem is a problem when someone makes it into a problem. So I'm going to suggest 5 steps that can be taken, and any citizen anywhere can raise these issues. And I'm in touch with people from donor countries, of course, with people in Israel. First step is to cancel the PLO, the UNRWA war curriculum, which comes out of the Palestinian Authority. It's based on jihad, martyrdom, right of return by force of arms, instead of the UN principle of peace begins here. The second issue is this disarmament of UNRWA schools, asking every donor nation to demand that the UNRWA schools be disarmed. I think it's a reasonable idea that a United Nations school should be disarmed. You'll hear all the time, by the way, the word UNRWA doesn't appear much. They say the refugee camp in Jenin. That's an UNRWA refugee camp. Okay. Number 3, insist that UNRWA dismiss any employees who are associated with any of the terrorist organizations. Reasonable thing to do. Number 4, introduce UNHCR standards to advance resettlements of the 4th and 5th generation of refugees in the 1948 war. Now, the current PLO policy is that any Arab refugee resettlement would not be accepted because it interferes with the right of return to pre-1948 localities that often don't even exist. And last but not least, demanding an audit of donor funds to UNRWA. UNRWA has a $1.6 billion budget, and much of that money comes in cash. 67 nations and 33 nonprofit organizations contribute $1.6 billion to UNRWA. Most of it is not traceable. One of my advisors in the office who passed away, his name is Dr. Eli Lash, he used to be the head of medical services in Gaza, the Israel Civil Administration. He revealed the fact that medical equipment, medicines, many other things that go to hospitals, UNRWA, are then sold on the open market. And there are all kinds of other areas of organized crime, including prostitution, and where a lot of the cash goes. So those people who want to do something meaningful in the world that we live in. This is an agenda that is not popular, because if you, as I was warned by many people, if you challenge the credibility of a refugee camp or refugee agency, it's like taking my candy away from a baby. Who's going to really believe you? But I started young as a troublemaker. When I was 10 years old, we used to have the March of Dimes. So if you remember the March of Dimes, we put a dime on it, and I said, "Where's this money going?" It's all in cash. We didn't say the word cash. I wasn't speaking so sophisticated. And my mom, fortunately, she used to date Jonas Salk's brother at the University of Michigan. So she told me to write to him. They wrote me a very nice letter. I was 10 or 11. And, that we've set up a system, and it's a system when I went to social work school, that any nonprofit organization that gets cash has to have at the first page what happens to the cash. Well, if you look on the UNRWA, now give them the benefit of the doubt. Open the UNRWA website and see what they say about the cash. Oops, nothing's mentioned. Now, can anything criminal be brought against the people who donate to UNRWA? Well, all the countries that give money to UNRWA, there's 67 nations, you can't touch it. They're immune. However, there's 33 nonprofit organizations that can be prosecuted. So that's Manchester United. There's a few other. It's very easy to see that on their website. If there's anything going on which is of a criminal nature in UNRWA, we can prosecute civilly any of these agencies that are private agencies giving money to UNRWA. So, a lot to be done. Nakba is fake news, but I'm not popular for raising these issues. Now, what I'll ask is we have people here in the studio audience, so if somebody here wants to ask a question, speak loudly so that Lawrence and the rest of the world can hear you. So please, if you have any questions, please speak up.
If in 1948 the Arabs had been successful with 5 Arab armies as well as local Arab resistance, do you think the concept of the Palestinian people would ever have been invented? And how would the Arabs have kind of divided up what was once Jewish territory?
Well, the amazing thing is after the 48 war, there were 13 Jewish settlements that were destroyed in the 48 war. And then some of them were all murdered, like Parzion, another was taken to prison. And not one was left with one Jew there. The whole concept of Judenrein was taken by the Arab League. The Arab League created, of course, the war in 48. And by the way, what's the status of the Arab League today? They're still at war with Israel. Who's the kingpin of the Arab League? Saudi Arabia. Still at war, total war with Israel. Now, it was said over and over and over again, the Arab League would start where Hitler left off. However, by having a couple of peace processes with Jordan, with Egypt, and now maybe with Saudi Arabia, people forget it. But I like to ask difficult questions. Part of the problem is I'm a fanatic Jew, and I learn Daf Yomi in the morning, which is a page of the Talmud. And we say in Hebrew, Im lo sholim ein meshivim. If you don't ask, you don't get any questions. You don't get any answers. And there's many people who wish that I didn't ask these questions. But the issue of again, PLO, the Palestine Liberation Organization, which is the basis of the education system of UNRWA. Now they have a covenant, a charter, which hasn't been stopped, which hasn't been canceled, and it was supposed to be canceled. We, on April 24th, 1996, we had the only agency inside their meeting. Sent an Arab journalist. We quoted the fact that they didn't cancel their covenant, and this made me very unpopular because we were proven to be correct. Clinton had to have a special session where they supposedly met and did cancel the covenant, which they did. So the answer to your question is if the Arab states had won in 48, they just would have been very clear about their position of wiping out the Jews. But that's not something that, again, you can't, these days, you can't talk in these terms.
But what would have happened to the territory that Jews lived in? Would have been divided. Egypt would have taken, would Jordan have won? How would the Arabs
divide? It's very simple. No, that's a very good question. It's very simple. You learn this from history. When Jordan took over Judea and Samaria, there were 13 Jewish communities there that were wiped out, and the 55 synagogues in the old city of Jerusalem, were burned to a crisp. We were there's a certain lucky twist to all that. In 1966, King Hussein decided to refurbish what was the Jewish quarter of Jerusalem, and it was more or less empty when the Israel army came in there. I have an Arab friend who lived in the old city in Jerusalem. He was moved over to a place called Shafat, so the other side of Jerusalem. But the whole point of their total war, it's not understood. The PLO is a case of social war. By the way, one of the reasons it's not understood is because of how nice the Arabs are. I can tell you, as a journalist and as a social worker who deals with the Arabs in an intense way, how nice the people are. And very nice. You wouldn't imagine these people would murder you. But again, that's one of the charm of the Arabs is one of the things they have going on their side. And that's also, of course, I get information by interviewing Arab killers who are very happy to say what they do because I've just had a very nice coffee with them. Anyway, those are some of my thoughts this evening. If anyone has any other questions?
I'm just curious. You mentioned you were in a refugee camp.
Yeah.
What actually goes on?
First of all, look at my movies. They're on my. You'll see 40 movies on our website, israelbehindthenews.com. It's run like a regular city, and it's a little bit dilapidated, but it's not something that now. By the way, I personally don't go in there anymore. I have a thing about having my head attached to my body. Whatever. I'm a fanatic. I like a head attached to the body. But it's just normal sitting. However, it's abnormal because it's not always a case of a state of war going on. Here in Jerusalem, we have one refugee camp, one Shuafat, and there was no real tax system there, and the Arabs they get free water and free electricity, and the organized crime and 5 different terrorist organizations run the place basically. But
Does Israel provide the electricity?
yes, Israel provides electricity. That's right. The idea, everyone in Israel thinks short term. In other words, that's one of the problems we face. In the book I wrote, in Roadblock to Peace, to share again, I show that in the first paragraph of the book, I talk about what changed my life in 1967 after the 6 Day War, actually 68. I was a senior in high school at Akiba Hebrew Academy in Philadelphia, and the teacher brought in a special guest, Rabbi Eugene Weiner, who passed away a few years ago, to Israel. And he said, "This is your opportunity. This was an opportunity to take care of the refugees. Not in Arab countries anymore. They're under our control." So as soon as I got to Israel, I asked, and that was 1970. I started asking questions, which is a very dangerous thing to do. I said, "What about the refugees?" And the answer I got was that they're great for cheap labor, and that's the. And actually, in Jerusalem, I moved next door to a Kudlan tractor, and who said I just doubled my income by hiring the Arab refugees because I don't have to pay them so much. I said, well, what's going on here? He explained to me that the owner was subsidizing their life. So it was amazing. So I went to see, he said, because I like to be adventurous, I went to the spot where the Arab refugees were working. They were singing this song. What were they singing? They were singing a song. They were they were Arabs from Iraq, so he was from Iraq. They were Arab refugees, and they were singing a song. We're building these homes in Jerusalem for Arab, for the Jewish children, but for our grandchildren. We're going to take them back. So anyway, that's what's going on. Anyway,
Excuse me, I have a question.
Sure.
When one does an internet search of Nakba, what it is, just did it. It says that it was, the catastrophe of 1948. Isn't the first sort of thing we should do like the PR machine that has misinformation about it? Like how would you recommend to go about
well, basically, over the last 36 years that I've been doing this, I've been trying to do exactly that, to create a new information system. And I've fallen on my face many times because people have given up, and I think there's no reason to give up. And if I had the resources, right now I don't have the resources, maybe I will get them. I'm getting younger every day, which is good. If I wasn't getting younger every day, I wouldn't be doing what I'm doing. But to create a new system, when I was at the University of Wisconsin in Madison, before I came to Israel, I created a theme for Israel's PR. It was called "Israel is Real." Well, and if I had the opportunity, I would do it all. I would say, don't argue about Israel. Discuss Israel as a real place. I have many plans on my computer in my house, and how to do this. I've consulted with many people. My training is community organization, social work, and I'm looking for backers, looking for people to help out. But now I have a conflict of interest because I have 12 grandchildren and 6 children. The children are in the front lines, and I think that preserving their lives is something I like to do. So I have a conflict of interest. You understand? So,
Just say thank you. Thank you very much. Go ahead.
Thank you very much.
Hatzlacha Rabba.
Take my card, stay in touch.
Sorry?
Take my card, stay in touch.
Thank you.
My phone, my business.
It's okay.
Yeah, if you're going to ask a question, just speak up.
This book of yours, is it 9 years out of date?
What?
Is this book of yours 9 years out of date?
Yep.
So things have happened since then.
No. The book is 100% accurate and up to date with the exception of the figures of how many Arab people in the refugee camps. But people who work in the field still think it's very, very accurate in terms of the system.
Well, things have changed to a certain extent. For example, Prime Minister of Israel was EU about this problem.
Well, the EU, I'm glad you asked the question. There's some misinformation that came out. The European Parliament met in a special session to denounce Palestinian education, but not the EU. The European Union did not go along with it. Yesterday, the foreign minister from the European Union denounced the European Parliament for saying that. Some journalists who were involved in superficial reporting said it was the EU Parliament. There is no such thing as the EU Parliament. So anyway, but basically, what?
That's different structure.
Correct, but the most important thing is that the European Commission. I was a member of the EU-Israel Press Forum, and what goes into their policies is the European Commission, and the European Parliament has no influence. That's the story. Any other questions? I hope that 25 years from now, the next anniversary of the Nakba, we won't see the same situation that we're facing now. And I'm inviting everyone to stay with our website, of course, is israelbehindthenews.com.